Before we can start our studies of the symbols of astrology and its principles, let us make sure that we all on the same page when it comes to the natal chart diagram. Here you have a circle. It represents the circle of the sky around us, divided in 12 equal parts. Given that the entire circle is 360 degrees, each of those 12 parts is going to span 30 degrees of the sky of that circle around us. A natural question here will be, where's the starting point? So in Western astrology, the established starting point that is marked here on the 9 o'clock position of this dial is always the location of the sun at the spring equinox. So that is the spring equinox in the month of March. If you in the southern hemisphere, you have to remember that, or probably you already know that. From there on, we go in a numeric fashion and we just number each of those parts. Here we have 1 Aries. I want to emphasize that the division is actually numeric. Yes, we do use the zodiacal names, and so we'll have Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. But in reality, the focus here is on the number. This is the part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. Because the division is numerical, this is why we can actually find a correspondence between the astrological divisions and the 12 meridian system in the traditional Chinese medicine, or between the astrological signs and the 12-fold daily function energy in Jinshinjutsu. Practically any time when you take a whole and divide it in 12 parts in order, there's a resonance between the first parts of that division, regardless of what the division is. There's some law of resonance out there in the universe always operating. In fact, you can take the human body and divide it into 12 parts, starting from the head all the way to the feet. This is why we associate head with Aries and the feet with Pisces. If you look at your specific natal chart, the first thing that you're going to see is that the energy, the sign on the 9 o'clock position, might not be Aries 1, but in this particular example is Scorpio. So what is the difference? The previous chart is really universal for all the beings on Earth. In a sense, it's the astrological chart of our planet, the Earth. When you look at your chart, that is your specific individual chart. So on the 9 o'clock, we place as a starting point the part of the sky that was just rising above the eastern horizon when you were born, if that is your natal chart. I picked here a chart that was arbitrary, and so what I did is, for the time of erecting this chart, Scorpio energy was rising above the horizon. You can go even a little bit more specific and you say, well, which degree of the 30 degrees of Scorpio was rising at the time when I created this chart? That point, that spot is called the Ascendant, and it's marked as AS on the chart. And you can see here that actually Scorpio was almost entirely above the horizon because the exact degree was 24 degrees. If I had waited a little bit longer, Sagittarius now would have been on the eastern horizon. By the way, it takes about 4 minutes for each degree to appear above the horizon. So you can see that if I had waited 4 minutes, the Ascendant now would have been 25 Scorpio. Another 20 minutes and it would have been the Sagittarius. You don't need to worry too much about those minutes, just FYI. The opposite point to the Ascendant is the point that was on the west and it was just setting. It's called the descendant, and it's marked here on the chart as DS. The two, the ascendant and descendant, form this line or axis that split the circle of the sky into two parts, above the horizon and below the horizon. Obviously, the one above the horizon will represent visibility, and it's really that literal sometimes. Everything above the horizon is visible. Below the horizon, things are private, they're obscure and in a darkness. So here is an example for you, if you wish, a checkpoint. We're all familiar with Angelina Jolie and Halle Berry. They're both celebrities. They have both won Academy Awards for their performances. But one of them has majority of the planets above the horizon in the visibility part of her chart, and the other one has majority of the planets below the horizon in the private part of the chart. Can you guess which one it is? So here I'm offering you a practice or a challenge. Without looking up their charts, try to guess which one has more planets above and which one has more planets below. I'll bring their charts in our first class and we can start our discussion from there. I can answer any questions. It should be fun. And not too challenging to guess. So trust your understanding here and go literally for visibility. Who is more visible? Who has more privacy? And see where it takes you. Let me give you another point of the chart that is called midheaven. It marks the position that is highest above the horizon. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to be exactly on top of our heads. Unless you live somewhere in the subtropics. I live in the moderate latitudes, 40 for Washington, D.C. I never see the sun or any of those parts of the circle go above my head. But at any given point, at any given time, there is a point of that circle that is highest above the horizon. So that is the midheaven, marked as MC. And the opposite is IC. Don't ask me to pronounce those two names. They stand for the Latin for the highest and the lowest point in heaven. The IC part doesn't have a name. It's usually called opposite to midheaven unless you go with the Latin name. The four create our special, unique cross for our life. The ascendant symbolizes our entry point, and it literally was the entry point. When you were born, that was the point in the horizon that was just entering the visibility circle. And as such, it represents you in a way, how you make your entry to the world. Imagine yourself walking into a room. There are people out there, you don't know them. What are they going to see when you enter that room? They're going to see your hair, the color of your skin, whether you're tall or not, how you comport yourself. So all this first impression will always be determined by your ascendant, the energy. So for this chart, that will be the Scorpio. And conversely, that will be the energy with which you are the most comfortable presenting yourself in a room full of people, of strangers. On the opposite end, the descendant for this particular chart is Taurus. That energy will actually show what's on the other end. Now, the opposite, and the entry here is not the exit. I have never had desire to look at the exits. Few of us can actually have the courage to look at the exit. There is no point. So I want to point out here that the descendant is actually the reflection of your entry point. So it's not the exit point in the chart, but it's really the people in the room. When you enter, who are the people on the other side? So those are your natural partners. For this chart, Taurus will be the energy that holds the key to who are your natural partners, for good or for bad. These are the people with whom you have long-standing relationships on equal footing, not parents, not children, not bosses, not pets. But the people with whom you feel equal and even, you could be locked in a battle with them, suing your neighbor. That will be your partner, and that energy will hold the key to resolving that issue. It could be your spouse, significant other, long-term boyfriend, girlfriend. As long as you feel the relationship is on equal footing, that will be the energy representing there. It doesn't even matter the age. Your significant other could be older or younger. If the relationship is on equal footing, that is the energy of the partners. For the midheaven, you can guess, in this particular case, Virgo gives you a key to that visibility point. It is the highest visibility. So it tells you what people see before you have even entered the room. So your reputation precedes you. That is your reputation, your visibility, your career. What people see when they talk about you, they might have not even seen you. Your public standing, what you are in the neighborhood, in your community, in your church, that is what that energy shows. The map, this is also a map, so you can actually go to that energy and say, this is my most comfortable energy to show there as my career, my reputation. On the opposite end of the highest visibility is the most private part. For this chart, it's Pisces, so this energy holds the key to your roots, your spiritual roots. This is where you grounded. This is where you have the solid, healthy roots, so you can actually grow up and reach out and accomplish all these wonderful things in the world and present yourself and have relationships with the partners and build a reputation and career. On a very literal sense, the roots represent your house, your home, and also your early childhood, because it represents so much about your growing process, where you're coming from. So think in terms of roots. That is the energy that shows what your roots are, and also which energy can ground you into your spiritual roots, in your center, knowing who you are. Now, some people, if you look at this chart, you can see that this cross between the descendant line and the midheaven, MC and IC line, is tilted. And for most of us, is tilted. So we start counting the division of this circle. We're going to count from the 9 o'clock position, and we're going to go down to the right and circle around, and we're going to split the circle into, again, 12 equal parts, starting from that entry point, from the energy that was our entry point. So we're going to call this first house. But look, inside the circle, there's a smaller dial that already does that for us. So we just have to go around and see that this is the second house, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh. We don't have to count them. We can see them directly into the inner dial, 10th, 11th, and 12th. This system of division is called the whole sign system. This is the system I like. I find its simplicity attractive to me. There are more systems, and I'll give you other, just to get the flavor for what is out there. I like it. It appeals to my sense of simplicity and beauty and symmetry. It also reminds me not to get bogged down too much in complexity. The language of astrology could be overwhelming, and sometimes it feels like a rabbit hole. So by using the whole sign system, it keeps me grounded, and it reminds me, keep it simple. Don't go with more complex things. You cannot. There's nothing more. If you can't see it in the simpler system, there's nothing more. Yes, you can see some things, but there's usually a price to pay for with complexity. So what are other systems out there? One very natural derivative of this whole sign system is to look at this cross between the ascendant, and the MC and IC line, and just turn the dial a little bit to the right in this case, so that the ascendant is actually aligned at the 9 o'clock position. The descendant then clicks onto the 3 o'clock position. The MC and the IC points are still mismatched with the top and the bottom, and that depends on the time of the year when we are born. If you see a chart like that is missing the ascendant and the descendant symbols, but still all the parts are equal, this is called the equal houses sign. Some astrologers, actually many of them, go even further. They want to have the line, the MCIC line, as a special dividing line. So what they do is, instead of turning, they cannot turn this dial anymore, because if they turn, then the ascendant will be now misaligned. So in order to make the other line, the midheaven line, and the opposite of the midheaven line as a special axis, they stretch out some of the divisions. So here you can actually see that the upper right corner of our circle is stretched, and all those parts of the sky actually take up larger space. And the upper left corner now is compressed a little bit, so it takes smaller space. For this specific, there are many different ways you can go and make those divisions. But for this specific example here on our screen, I used the Koch system, which was used by the last astrologer I consulted. Don't get too hung up on systems, this versus that. I have found for myself that the systems are simply, they're very similar to the different dialects of the same language. You have variations. Take for example the English language. The way people speak English in England are different from the English in the US or Australia or New Zealand. You can even take a large country, US for instance. People on the East Coast speak slightly different from the West Coast, South and North. But they're all the same language, and you can always get your point across. Yes, sometimes it might be a different point with a different tone, but everybody can get to different points through their own system. There are no good and bad systems, right and wrong. You just pick whichever you like. I like the whole sign, again, for the simplicity. That is the most ancient one anyway, but somewhere between the ancient Greece and the modern Western astrology, we ended up with 10 or more different systems, and that not even counting the Vedic astrology. For our class, we will actually use the whole sign. You will see the symbols for the ascendant, for the midheaven, etc. And the divisions of the sky will always be equal. With that, we are actually ready to start our class.